When people talk about Hollywood's golden age, they often conjure images of iconic movie stars, irresistible charm, and a genuine passion for film. But behind the dazzling lights and glamorous facades lurked a much darker reality one rarely discussed. Beneath the surface, the era hid sinister truths, scandals, and troubling behavior that cast a shadow over its glittering reputation. That's why legendary actor Burt Lancaster agreed to share an exclusive account of Hollywood's more chilling side. It became a moment worth paying attention to. Known for his sharp memory and candid nature, Lancaster offered first-hand stories of some of the most disturbing figures he encountered in the industry. People he believed to be among the most dangerous actors of his time. But what gives Lancaster the credibility to speak so openly about this hidden side of Hollywood? Before becoming one of the most iconic and versatile stars of his generation, Burt Lancaster, born Burton Stephen Lancaster on November 2, 1913, Manhattan, grew up in the tough but vibrant neighborhood of East Harlem. Raised in a working-class Irish-American family, his father worked as a postal clerk while his mother stayed at home to care for the family. Despite the challenges of his urban upbringing, Lancaster was nurtured in a household that emphasized hard work, resilience, and strong family ties. From an early age, Lancaster stood out for his independence, physical strength, and magnetic charm qualities that would later define his on-screen presence. He attended DeWitt Clinton High School in the Bronx, where he discovered a love for athletics. His talent earned him an athletic scholarship to New York University, where he excelled in both basketball and gymnastics. Before Hollywood ever came calling, Lancaster made a name for himself as a circus acrobat. In his early 20s, he joined the Cale Brothers Circus and toured the country, performing as part of a high-flying acrobatic duo. This experience not only honed his impressive physical abilities, allowing him to perform many of his own movie stunts, but also taught him discipline and stagecraft, both of which would serve him well in his acting career. After serving in World War II with the U.S. Army's Special Services Unit, where he performed in shows for American troops, Lancaster was encouraged to try acting. His breakout role came in 1946 with The Killers, film noir classic in which he played a doomed character known as the Swede. The performance was electrifying and instantly catapulted him to stardom. Throughout the late 1940s and 1950s, Lancaster emerged as a leading man in Hollywood. But he wasn't content with being just a rugged action star. He was deeply committed to growing as an actor. He sought out roles that were daring and diverse, ranging from gritty film noirs and adventurous epics to nuanced character-driven dramas. Some of his most acclaimed performances include From Here to Eternity, 1953, Sweet Smell of Success, 1957, and Elmer Gantry, 1960, the last of which earned him an Academy Award for Best Actor. He continued to take on powerful roles in Judgment at Nuremberg, 1961, Birdman of Alcatraz, 1962, and decades later, in Atlantic City, 1980, for which he received another Oscar nomination. Now, with decades of experience behind him, Lancaster opens the door to a hidden past that's as haunting as it is fascinating. In the later years of his career, Burt Lancaster continued to captivate audiences with powerful roles. He appeared in Local Hero and gave a memorable performance as the gentle Moonlight Graham in Field of Dreams, 1989, introducing his talent to a whole new generation of filmmakers. Beyond acting, Lancaster was a pioneer in the industry. He co-founded Hechtel Lancaster, one of Hollywood's first independent film production companies. Through this venture, he helped produce Marty, 1955, a modest film that went on to win the Academy Award for Best Picture. The film's success opened the door for more realistic, socially relevant storytelling in Hollywood, a major shift from the glamorized studio IRA formulas off-screen. Lancaster was known not only for his talent, but also for his unwavering principles. A man of strong moral conviction, he was vocal in his opposition to racism, censorship, and political persecution. He supported the civil rights movement, marched with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and stood firmly against the Vietnam War. He was Also an early and outspoken critic of the House Un-American Activities Committee, in an industry often shaped by silence and image management, Lancaster stood out as someone willing to risk his career for his beliefs. Even as he aged, Lancaster continued choosing roles that challenged audiences and defied easy categorization. But after suffering a stroke in 1990, which left him partially paralyzed and impaired his speech, he retired from acting. Though he could no longer perform, his legacy marked by integrity, versatility, and courage remained firmly intact. As the golden age of Hollywood faded into the nostalgia of the 1970s, so too did the star system that had once elevated actors. Like Lancaster, industry was evolving, and many of the powerful studios that had defined that era were collapsing. Watching these changes unfold, Lancaster recognized that he had lived through a unique, canned, often disturbing period in film history. Determined to document what he had witnessed, Lancaster began writing a book, but it wasn't a typical celebrity memoir, titled The Most Evil of Them All, A Survivor's List. This deeply personal project aimed to reveal the truth behind the myths. It wasn't about red carpet moments or studio gossip, it was about lifting the veil on the darker side of an industry built on illusion. He didn't want to preserve the fantasy of the golden age, he wanted to confront it. Too many, Lancaster had long embodied the ideal of American masculinity, strong, stoic, charismatic. But behind the screen presence was a thoughtful observer who had seen the machine from the inside. And what he saw, he later claimed, was a world driven by manipulation, unchecked ambition, startling cruelty. The Most Evil of Them All was never published during Lancaster's lifetime. He likely knew that if it were, the public might dismiss it as a bitter actor's revenge or a cynical cash grab. But Lancaster's intentions seemed rooted in something deeper and need to tell the truth, no matter how uncomfortable. So what exactly did he write? He began with Mickey Rooney. According to Lancaster, Rooney wore the mask of mischief. To the public, he was America's charming boy next door, the beloved child star with a twinkle in his eye. But Lancaster claimed there was another side to him, a hot-tempered, deeply troubled man hiding behind the facade. This, Lancaster wrote, was not uncommon in Hollywood, a place where public personas were carefully crafted, often masking darker private lives, and this was only the beginning. Lancaster claimed that Mickey Rooney's charm was nothing more than a carefully maintained actor mask that concealed a far crueler reality. Behind the boyish grin and fast-talking energy, Lancaster described Rooney as a bully, particularly unkind to younger actors and women. According to him, Rooney took pleasure in mocking extras and sabotaging scenes just to humiliate others. While the public saw his many marriages as romantic misadventures, Lancaster saw a more disturbing pattern, one of control, manipulation, and emotional abandonment. Next on his list was Kirk Douglas, the man Lancaster dubbed the Ruthless Titan. The two had worked together on several films, including Gunfight at the OK Corral and 7 Days in May, and were often seen as friends and collaborators. But according to Lancaster's private writings, their friendship was a carefully constructed illusion. In truth, he claimed, the two harbored deep resentment toward each other. Lancaster described Douglas as cold, ambitious to the point of obsession, and willing to betray anyone, including his own family, for a career advantage. He accused Douglas of underhanded deals, blacklisting rivals, and using charm not as a gift, but as a weapon. Female stars weren't spared Lancaster's scrutiny either. He referred to Natalie Wood as the siren with a secret, far from the fragile, tragic figure she often portrayed on screen. Lancaster claimed she was skilled in manipulating public sympathy to her advantage. He described her as emotionally calculating, someone who could hurt others while leaving them confused and longing for her approval. Elizabeth Taylor, to Lancaster, was the Diamond Queen of drama, famed for her beauty and scandalous love life. Taylor was also, in his words, a storm in disguise. Lancaster claimed she could bring entire productions to a halt with her mood swings, tantrums, and behind-the-scenes power plays. She didn't just steal scenes, he wrote. She stole souls. He believed her emotional intensity, while captivating on screen, wreaked havoc on those around her, directors, co-stars, and romantic partners alike. Lancaster called Spencer Tracy the tyrant behind the talent. Though revered for his performances, Tracy, he wrote, was a man tormented by alcoholism, his rage frequently spilled onto sets. He allegedly intimidated crew members and emotionally abused co-stars, could play saints on screen, Lancaster wrote, but he was a devil in the dressing room, while others excused Tracy's behavior as the burden of genius. Lancaster emphasized the damage it left in its wake. Even James Stewart, the quintessential everyman of American cinema, wasn't immune to Lancaster's criticisms. Dubbed the dark heart of decency, Stewart was known to the public as kind, patriotic, and morally upright. But Lancaster claimed that was a facade. He smiled for the camera, he wrote, but judged everyone behind it. In private, Stewart was allegedly cold, aloof, and condescending, a man who used his squeaky clean image to maintain control and manipulate perception. And then there was Marilyn Monroe. Lancaster labeled her the angel of addiction. He described her as a vortex of need whose personal demons drained everyone around her. Her struggles, he claimed, weren't just tragic. They were weaponized. She used helplessness as a tool, creating chaos on sets and emotionally ensnaring powerful figures who believed they were saving her, but in truth they were being consumed. Errol Flynn to Lancaster was the devil-may-care desperado. Charming sociopath in a pirate's costume, recounted stories of wild parties, violent outbursts, and a long list of victims, many silenced by money or fear. Flynn, he wrote, lived as though nothing and no one else mattered, because to him, they didn't. Finally, Lancaster turned his attention to the Crosbys. He called Bing Crosby the crooner of cruelty and described his son, Gary, as the inheritor of darkness. While Bing's smooth voice won the hearts of millions, Lancaster claimed that beneath the polished surface was a cold, controlling man. He pointed to rumors of strict, even abusive parenting and icy behavior behind the scenes. He could sing a lullaby to the world, Lancaster wrote, but be merciless to his own children. Gary Crosby, in Lancaster's view, wasn't just a victim but someone who carried his father's cruelty forward. Shaped and scarred by it, Lancaster claimed that Gary Crosby didn't just carry his father's name, he carried the damage, too. The anger, the bitterness, the unresolved pain. As an adult, Gary reportedly mirrored much of the emotional turmoil he had experienced growing up. Lancaster didn't label him a villain, but rather a tragic byproduct of inherited trauma. Painful example of how cycles of harm can repeat if left unhealed. What made these accusations all the more unsettling was the confirmation that came later from Crosby's own children, especially Gary. Their public admissions about Bing's cold and often abusive parenting lent credibility to Lancaster's words, stripping away doubts that might have dismissed his revelations as bitter exaggerations. And yet, Lancaster wasn't done. He turned his pen toward Henry Fonda, describing him as the courtroom solar man so emotionally detached it felt cruel. Lancaster claimed Fonda treated life the way a judge might treat a defendant, coldly, analytically, without empathy. This, he believed, wasn't simple introversion, but rather a quiet form of disdain. People froze in his presence, unsure of how to read him, always feeling measured on, found lacking. Lancaster also suggested that Fonda's emotional distance carried over into fatherhood, claim later echoed by his daughter Jane Fonda. And Jane herself was not spared. To Lancaster, she was the revolutionary with a ruthless streak. He admired her intellect and passion, but also feared her intensity. She wasn't just politically active, he claimed she was strategic, even calculating. He believed she used activism not just to fight for causes, but to build and protect her image. She could be warm and charismatic, he wrote, then cold as stone when someone questioned her narrative. To him, her beliefs weren't just sincere, they were tactical. Joan Crawford, the indomitable star of Mildred Pierce, was next. Lancaster dubbed her the Iron Matriarch. On set, she was reportedly a force of will, commanding, unbending, and often feared. He described her as a master of image control, able to dominate a room with a single sharp glance. He accused her of mistreating assistants, manipulating colleagues, and maintaining an iron grip on her public persona. He even hinted at her parenting style, referencing the allegations later made by her daughter. Christina in Mommy Dearest. Then came the most unexpected name on Lancaster's list, Lucille Ball, America's beloved queen of comedy. Known for her laughter and warmth, was given a much colder title, the Queen of Control. According to Lancaster, Ball was a brilliant but ruthless businesswoman who ran Desilu Productions like a battlefield. He claimed she micromanaged her staff, brokered secretive deals, and prioritized authority over camaraderie. Her iconic laugh, he wrote, could cut through a room like a blade when things didn't go her way. With such scathing assessments of others, readers might naturally wonder about Lancaster's own life. The man behind the pen, well, he was notoriously private. Glimpses of his personal history reveal a complicated but deeply human story. He was married 3 times. His first marriage, in 1935, was to June Ernst, a fellow circus performer he met during his acrobatic days. She was a trapeze artist, and together they shared a passion for physical performance and the nomadic thrill of the circus. But as Lancaster transitioned into film in the 1940s, their paths began to diverge. The relentless demands of Hollywood, the long hours, constant travel, and rising fames trained their bond. They quietly separated in 1946, without children, just as his star was rising. That same year, he married Norma Anderson. This was his longest and most formative relationship. Norma supported him through the heights of his career, from his breakout in The Killers to his Oscar-winning role in Elmer Gantry. Together, they had 5 children: James, William, Susan, Joanna, and Sigalan. Despite the strains that came with fame, Lancaster always emphasized how much he cared for his family. Still, the marriage was not without complications. Long absences, emotional distance, and multiple affairs eventually fractured their union. They divorced in 1969 after more than 2 decades together. Though Norma remained a respected and important figure in his life, Lancaster didn't remarry until the 1990s, when he wed Susan Martin. By then, his health had begun to decline. Their marriage was brief, but tender. Susan stood by his side through heart problems and a debilitating stroke, offering comfort in his final years. He died in 1994 with her beside him finally, perhaps having found a quiet kind of peace outside of marriage. Lancaster's love life drew considerable attention. One of the most notable romances was his affair with British actress Deborah Kerr during the filming of From Here to Eternity in 1953. Their chemistry on screen was undeniable, but their off-screen connection was more than just a fleeting Hollywood fling. It added yet another layer of complexity to Lancaster's public and private identity. Their on-screen chemistry, especially in the now iconic beach scene from Here to Eternity, became the stuff of legend. Off-screen, the connection between Burt Lancaster and Deborah Kerr was said to mirror that same intensity. Though both were married at the time, their affair remained a well-guarded secret in Hollywood circles. Quiet, discreet, but by all accounts, deeply emotional. It was not a passing fling, but a powerful bond that lingered in both of their lives. There were other romances whispered about, but never publicly confirmed. One particularly enduring rumor involved a celebrated actress from the 1930s and 40s known for her wit, sophistication, and sharp screen presence. The two were often seen together and shared what many described as an unusually close companionship. Whether it was love or deep friendship, Lancaster never spoke publicly about it. More openly acknowledged was his relationship with actress Shelley Winters. Outspoken and famously candid in her autobiographies, Winters described Lancaster as passionate, magnetic, but emotionally guarded. He could be tender one moment and unreachable the next. This duality, she wrote, was something many of his lovers had to accept or endure as time marched forward. The man once known for his athletic grace and striking physicality began to slow down. The muscular frame that had powered his early performances and allowed him to perform his own stunts gradually weakened. For a man who had lived so vigorously first as a circus acrobat, then as a Hollywood star, this decline was particularly painful, both for himself and for those who had idolized him. In the 1980s, Lancaster's health began to falter. He was diagnosed with atherosclerosis, a condition that causes the arteries to harden and narrow due to plaque buildup. Ice. It's a silent killer gradually, starving the body of healthy blood flow and dramatically increasing the risk of heart attacks and strokes. For Lancaster, it marked the beginning of a long, difficult health battle. In 1983, he was rushed into emergency surgery for a quadruple coronary artery bypass, a serious and invasive procedure that spoke to how advanced his condition had become. Though the operation was technically successful, it left him weakened and physically diminished. The vibrant energy that once defined him was fading. And then, in 1990, tragedy struck again. Massive stroke left him partially paralyzed and robbed him of his ability to speak clearly. Cruel twist of fate for a man whose voice had once commanded attention across the silver screen. He could no longer walk unassisted, let alone act. The stroke ended his public life and brought his career to an abrupt and final halt. More than the physical limitations, the loss of his voice was a devastating blow. His voice had always been central to his presence, deep, deliberate, charismatic, silenced. He retreated from public view entirely. The once dominant screen legend spent his final years in seclusion, cared for by his third wife, Susan Martin, and a small circle of devoted loved ones and caregivers. On October 20th, 1994, Burt Lancaster passed away quietly in his Century City apartment on the west side of Los Angeles. He was 80 years old. The news of his death sent waves through the entertainment industry. Tributes poured in from across the globe. Directors, actors, critics, and fans all mourned the loss of a man who had redefined masculinity on screen, who had shown that an actor could be both brawny and cerebral, both magnetic and meaningful. Lancaster's life was immense, filled with triumphs, contradictions, romances, and regrets. He had soared from a working-class neighborhood in East Harlem to the heights of Hollywood royalty. He had dazzled in swashbuckling adventures, stunned in powerful dramas, and dared to tell truths many were afraid to hear. Even as the golden age faded and the lights dimmed, his legacy remained bright. Decades after his death, Burt Lancaster's name still echoes in the halls of film history, not just for the roles he played, but for the man he dared to be.